أهلا بكم. مع استمرار الحرب الروسية على أوكرانيا، تساؤلات كثيرة تطرح عن مصير تلك الحرب في ظل الحديث عن وجوب الاستمرار في مد أوكرانيا بالذخيرة والأسلحة الثقيلة. فما مدى قدرة الدول على مواصلة دعم أوكرانيا في مواجهة الروس؟ ماذا عن وحدة حلف الناتو الذي يسعى الكرملين لتصويره على أنه مفكك؟ وما مدى انخراط الناتو في الحرب إجمالا وعملية تسليح القوات الأوكرانية؟ دول غير عضوة في حلف الناتو طلبت المساعدة فيما تسعى موسكو لزعزعة استقرارها مثل مولدوفا. فماذا يعني ذلك؟ تلك الأسئلة وغيرها نطرحها على ضيفتنا من بلجيكا الأمينة العامة المساعدة لحلف الناتو بيبا براتشا. أهلا بك في أخبار الآن سيدة براتشا. في البداية، مع مواصلة الحرب الروسية الأوكرانية، هل تشير المستجدات اليوم إلى أن الرئيس بوتين يستعد للسلام برأيك أم للمزيد من الحرب وهجمات جديدة؟
Thank you very much for your interest and for having me on your show. Answering your question, no, we don't see that President Putin would be preparing for peace. Quite clearly, he's throwing new forces. More of his soldiers are dying, more equipment being wiped out by Ukrainian forces. So Russia is conducting this aggression. It's a nuclear armed state attacking a smaller neighbor in violation of the UN Charter, all international laws that there is.
نعم. قال وزراء دفاع الناتو أن قضية إمداد أوكرانيا بالطائرات المقاتلة كانت على جدول الأعمال، لكنها ليست القضية الأكثر إلحاحا الآن. ماذا يعني ذلك وما هي القضية الملحة الآن إذن؟
In short, I think we have to clarify certain things. So NATO, as NATO, is not part of the war, and NATO is not providing lethal aid to Ukraine. There is a group of allies who coordinated outside of NATO. It's led by the United States. And upon request of Ukraine, what help does it need? Lethal help. This group of allies and countries beyond, countries such as Australia, such as countries in other parts of the world, are coordinating their assistance. So if they have discussed about jets or if they have discussed about other lethal equipment and lethal aid, it would not have been as part of NATO's defense ministers meeting. So I cannot confirm this quote that you gave me. So what NATO is doing is non-lethal aid. So we provide medical help, winter equipment, electric generators, a variety of things, anti-drone equipment, and so on and so forth. Everything but lethal aid from NATO. Just to, again, to reiterate that NATO is not part of the war. Russia, of course, is trying to hide its weakness and hide its failure of this war by saying that it's not fighting against Ukraine, but it's fighting against NATO. And that's a lie. It's one of the Russian lies.
نعم. سيدة براتشا، لا يزال الكرملين يراهن على أن الناتو لن يتحد، لكن كما نرى أن دول الناتو لا تزال متحدة. كيف يساعد ذلك التصميم المشترك في الحفاظ على زخم أوكرانيا في الأيام الحاسمة؟
Of course, NATO is still united. NATO is a defense alliance. It's an alliance of 30 countries, which is based on the United Nations Charter, on the Article 51, that if there is an armed attack, if there is an aggression against one of NATO's states, the other states will come to help it. So it's the same articles that Ukraine is self-defending. So Ukraine was attacked. It's a violation of Article 51 of the UN Charter. UN Secretary General has called it out. UN General Assembly has called it out. There are 141 countries who voted to ask Russia to leave Ukraine and stop its aggression. So the international community and the world is very clearly expressing what it is. So that's why for NATO, of course, we stand in support of international law. We stand of support for a country whose territorial integrity, whose peace, whose civilian population, whose right to choose what it wants for itself has been violated. I presume that countries all around the world, whether that's looking at Emirates, whether it's looking at Saudis, whether it's looking elsewhere, that all countries want to choose what is best for themselves, and it's the sovereign right of those countries. So Ukraine has decided that it wants to be an independent country with its people and it wants to run its affairs, only deciding itself. So Russia currently is attacking Ukraine with weapons, with aggression, violating the rights, sovereign rights of Ukraine to decide what is best in its interest.
نعم، مع كل ما يجري من تطورات تكبدت القوات الروسية خسائر كبيرة كما نعرف. برأيك ماذا سيحدث في منطقة باخموت في الأيام المقبلة؟
Again, it would not be right to speculate for me as NATO representative what might or might not happen. What we are seeing from intelligence, from open sources, and from Russian-owned and Ukrainian sources is quite clear that Russia has been trying to take Bakhmut since last August. It has not been able to advance for more than insignificant numbers of meters, a few hundred meters. Possibly kilometers. So there is no strategic or significant advantage that is being gained by Russia. So Ukraine is successfully self-defending around Bakhmut, and it has said that it will continue to doing so. So it's very difficult to say how the situation will develop, but quite clearly we don't see that President Putin would be trying to stop war, to start peace talks, or genuinely deciding that trying to stop killing Ukrainians is a way to go, and trying to stop killing its own people, because don't forget there are tens of thousands of Russian losses on the battlefield.
سيدة براتشا، دعم حلفاء الناتو أوكرانيا على مدار العام الماضي بدعم عسكري ومالي واقتصادي بقيمة تقترب من 150 مليار يورو، ومنها 65 مليار يورو كدعم عسكري. هل أنتم قادرون على مواصلة هذا النوع من الدعم، أي الدعم العسكري؟
Indeed, the allies and not only allies but also partners all around the world, as I mentioned, Australia is helping, New Zealand is helping, others are helping with a variety of support, humanitarian, financial, military, and so on and so forth. And that support is provided really for Ukraine to be able to be maintaining as a sovereign democratic state in Europe. So that is the essence: support to international law, support to the principles of the UN Charter, which requires an active action by all the countries around the world. So in that respect, allies are united, committed, and will continue to provide support that is needed. So that hasn't changed. But I would also like to point out that it's not just a theoretical notion, this rules-based international order. It has allowed countries such as United Arab Emirates to prosper. It has allowed, by having this international predictability, trade rules that countries engage with, instead of just having who has the might is right, because then we would end all up in a chaos, and then no investment decisions, no education decisions, no predictability whatsoever for financial or other industry would be there. So international trade, everything would be undermined. So we have to remember that we all have stakes in international rules-based orders, that these international rules are viable, that they are implemented, and that a country, whether it's a nuclear state or other, cannot just decide to violate sovereignty and aggressively attack other countries.
أيضا حذر الأمين العام لحلف الناتو مرارا وتكرارا من أن ذخيرة أوكرانيا قد تنفد. هل أنتم راضيين عن وتيرة دول الاتحاد الأوروبي ودول الناتو في زيادة طاقاتها الإنتاجية؟
This is indeed a massive war. Russia is shooting missiles, tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition, and Ukraine is using all support it can to resist. So indeed, our defense industries, meaning the wider defense industry, not only in the Allied States but elsewhere, have been quite busy making sure that they can get supplies to Ukraine to resist, to defend. And I think that has been one of the main lines of effort also for NATO, because again, we are, as an organization, we are a peace project for our nations. NATO was established 49 years ago. and 74 years ago in 1949. And the main purpose of NATO is peace among our people, peace on our territory. So for that, of course, we also need military force to defend ourselves if there is an armed attack. And for that, we have defense industries ensuring that there is enough supplies, that there is enough ammunition, that there is a predictability of supply. So the current situation is, of course, that countries want to provide as much as possible to Ukraine, but in the same time, they also are responsible for their own defense. So they are always calibrating, making sure that they have sufficient amounts, if necessary, to defend themselves. So this is where the defense industries currently are stepping up. There is a very close coordination with the EU because, again, EU has a certain capacity and ability to also ramp up their connections and their networks and their supplies to ensure that, all right, there is enough for our own defense, but in the same time that there is enough to supply also to Ukraine. So it's a common effort. It's a common effort within, among the allies, but also with the other countries around the world.
سيدة بايبا، فيما يتعلق بخطوط أنابيب نورد ستريم، قال الأمين العام أيضا أن هناك عمل تخريبي وهناك تحقيقات جارية بخصوص ذلك، فهل انتهت تلك التحقيقات وماذا توصلت حتى الآن؟
Let's be clear, NATO is not running its own investigation. What Secretary General has said, indeed, it was based on the announcement of countries, of Sweden, of Germany and others, but NATO is not running our own investigation. We fully realize that the countries within whose competence and whose interests are touched there, that they will run the investigations properly and will identify perpetrators. What Secretary General has said is indeed that what we have seen that the reliance of Europe on Russian gas and other exports of significant resources have not been very beneficial for European security because they were neither reliable, they were neither trustworthy, and the business practices on top of that also were not exactly the most pure and clean. So separating themselves from this dependency on Russian gas and other materials and other resources is a good thing. And in that respect, we have to be very clear that Europe had stopped import through the Nord Stream pipeline already before the explosions took place. So we cannot anyhow connect the fact that there were explosions to the fact that European imports were affected or dependent on that. It was a political decision to stop Russian gas imports, and it was implemented, and you will have seen how quickly European countries have been able to find other sources of import of gas and reduce the overall use of gas in the energy supply within European countries. So these developments, of course, increase the internal resilience of countries, it increases predictability, security of supply, because again, it's working with the suppliers that are reliable, that are not aggressors, and that fulfills their commitments and run proper business practices.
نعم، لأتابع معك مع تصريحات الأمين العام الذي اقترح منذ فترة إمكانية انضمام فنلندا والسويد إلى الناتو بشكل منفصل. أين أصبح الأمر وهل يمكن أن تنضم الدولتان قريبا إلى الحلف وهل سيتم التصديق على أن فنلندا والسويد معا كعضوين كاملين؟
From the alliance's point of view, both countries have been long-term, fully interoperable partners, mature democracies. We have known both countries for years and years and years and worked very well in all the exercises, in values, terms, everything. So when they decided to join NATO, when they asked to be admitted as members, it was widely welcomed among the allied countries. Of course, there were countries, there was a country specifically, Turkey, that had a concern about specific aspects of issues related to terrorism and certainly Those conversations have taken place within the group of three as part of the trilateral memorandum between Finland, Sweden and Turkey. And other countries, all the other allies, 28, have ratified already the accession agreement of the two. We welcome the fact that Hungary is in the process of doing that. And also, quite clearly, Secretary General has said that both Finland and Sweden have completed the requirements that were there as part of the trilateral talks, as part of the trilateral memorandum. So the soonest possible ratification of their accession treaties are in place. Indeed, legally and from international law point of view, their membership is not tied to each other. So it would be up again to the countries, to the processes to decide whether they join one by one or whether they join it together. One fact is clear, that it has to be as soon as possible because, again, they will be excellent allies, they will strengthen the alliance, and we do think that they have fulfilled the necessary requirements that were there as part of the trilateral process, trilateral dialogue.
أيضا أعلنتم أن الناتو يقوم بتقييم طرق حماية الدول غير الأعضاء مثل مولدوفا، فماذا يعني ذلك وكيف؟
We have more than 40 partners around the world, including United Arab Emirates, including the countries in Northern Africa, even in Asia Pacific. We have 4 partners, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea. So each partner is different. Moldova is also a partner, so is Georgia, and each partner is different. So Moldova has expressed her wish to ask NATO for help in certain areas to build their defense capacity. That means training of troops or understanding intelligence or certain intelligence requirements or strategic communications and so on and so forth. So different elements, what different countries want in their relationship with NATO. So there's that individual process, and then they come to the conclusion, okay, this is a support or this is a mutual interest that the country and NATO can provide. It doesn't mean that the country necessarily becomes a member, not at all. Relationships are different, and requirements and interests are different, and they will be different depending on the partner. So for Moldova, it's been very specific requests that it had wanted to see in terms of training, in terms of coordination, strategic communication, some other aspects, countering disinformation, countering hostile information activities, hybrid activities. And that is where NATO will provide a certain training, a certain partnership support to Moldova. It doesn't mean that Moldova is asking to become a member of NATO.
أخيرا سيدة براتشا، كممثلة لحلف الناتو، كيف ترين المرحلة القادمة بشأن تلك الحرب؟ ودائما يقول الرئيس الأوكراني زيلينسكي أنه لا يوجد بديل لعضوية الناتو. هل تدرسون تسريع الانضمام أوكرانيا إلى الحلف ممكن الشهر المقبل؟
First, nobody knows how the war will end. Quite clearly, it's in international community's interest, in the interest of Emirates, in the interest of other countries, to make sure that Ukraine is able to sustain itself as an independent, democratic, sovereign state, despite the attack by Russia. So that is the most important objective, I think, for all of us, wherever we are, as humans, as individuals, as collectives, as countries, states, governments, organizations. For that, of course, Ukraine both needs the ability to defend itself, so it needs the military capabilities, but it also needs the will, the resolve. And there again, we as international community play an important role. All the support that we can give Ukraine, its people, its civilians, through donations, through various communication support, anything is highly appreciated, and it serves the common purpose to make sure that Ukraine is able to continue as independent, sovereign, democratic state to defend itself. And then, when the war ends, It will end at some moment. We don't know how it will end. We do know that the population of Ukraine is very clear that it sees the possibility of winning the war, that it knows how to define the victory. We have seen President Zelensky's 10 points in that respect. And we know that there is a absolute resolve of Ukrainian leadership and population to continue to defend itself till credible peace has been reached. And in that respect, I think it's very important that for us as international community, we provide that support, we continue to provide support, that we listen to Ukrainian wishes instead of trying to impose something on them, but also that wherever we are, that we have to understand that this is part of the bigger international process where we all have interests, vested interests, to make sure that our countries, our communities, that we as individuals can choose our destinies. That it's up to us to decide what education, what we want to get, how we bring our children up within, again, the system, rules-based system where we live, and how we as countries conduct our relations with other countries, that it's for nobody else to decide that.
الأمينة العامة المساعدة لحلف الناتو بيبا براتشا، كنت معنا من بلجيكا، شكرا لك.
Thank you for your interest and all the best.